Welcome to Mean Green Game Day. I'm your host, Sarah Baskin, sitting in for Michelle Brooks today. Joining me are Jack Brown, Justin Ballou, and Connor Hibbett. Fellas, how are we feeling today?
Fantastic.
Feeling great.
It's a great day. It's a great weekend of basketball. It's the last weekend of basketball in the regular season before we move into conference tournaments. Stakes are going to be really high. We're going to talk about who we like for the CUSA tournament, who we like moving into March Madness, and of course, preview today's big matchup against UAB. But first, let's get into last weekend's games against Marshall. So UNT split that series. They did win the first game, came out looking really strong, but they lost the second game in pretty heartbreaking fashion. Jack, what did you see from the team last weekend?
Yeah, so like you said, Sarah, they came out the first game and just destroyed. And I think they played their style of basketball. And then the second game is really where they kind of struggled. They were down, and they flipped the script. You know, the first game, UNT they were killing it, got to the free throw line. They shot 20 free throws, beat them in field goal percentage, three-point percentage. And then the next game, it flipped the script. They kind of played Marshall's style of play. As you know, Marshall's the #1 team in pace, so they fell into that just fast-paced kind of game against Marshall, and then they just couldn't come out and win.
I mean, do you think it had to do with an identity thing, Justin? Like they should have stuck to their own identity in that second game?
Well, I think it was more in the second game that Marshall sharpshooters just caught fire. I mean, the Friday game was really all about James Reese and Thomas Bell. I mean, those two guys, 36 combined points. James Reese tied his career high with 21. Throughout this whole weekend, UNT really showed me that they can compete with fast-paced teams. I didn't even think they played bad in that Saturday game. It was just that Marshall sharpshooters really caught fire. Andrew Thomas was 5 for 5 on three-point shots in that ball game. Javian Hamlet had 28, but it really just wasn't enough because there wasn't enough scoring from outside of him in that game. But it was a come-from-behind effort in that Saturday game. Javian Hamlet just put the team on his back in that second half, and it just made sense that the game was in Javian Hamlet's hands at the end of the game. And it just sucks that he couldn't have made that shot because it was such a good game, and UNT really just proved that they can compete with these faster teams. And it was a worry coming into this game for me because of UNT's slow pace, and usually fast-paced teams would give them a problem. But I thought defensively their scheme was really on point. They were forcing Marshall to shoot some tough shots. And on Friday, they really were making them shoot some threes that they weren't comfortable with. They got out so far in front in that game that Marshall was really a one-dimensional team. It was just heaving up shots, and that's not their ball game, and that's why UNT won that game. Saturday was a different story because Marshall was making those shots, but UNT still had a great defensive scheme, and they executed the game plan very well.
Connor, talk to me about that defensive scheme that Justin's talking about. You know, it obviously worked really well in that Friday game. What did you see?
What UNT does really well, and it's actually, I've watched a lot of college basketball this season, and they've been some of the best at it. They move their feet tremendous. They don't play ole defense, and I see that from a lot of teams throughout the country. We see that in a lot of sports, that term ole defense. UNT does not do that. They move their feet. They don't reach. They don't just try to go for the steal. They force difficult shots. Now, like Justin said, Marshall was making them. They were 10 of 18 on threes, about 55%. I don't care who you are. That's going to be hard to make up. But UNT almost did that, like Justin also mentioned, with Javian Hamlet. Javian Hamlet basically put the team on his back. He was 6 of 7 on threes. He's only hit 23s all season. So what does that tell you? So fortunately for UNT, he was making those shots because if UNT played like their regular self on offense, the game wouldn't have been as close. But I don't really think the final score indicates how well UNT played. And what I mean by that is despite 70-plus points for the Marshall offense, UNT still played really good defense, and that's something that I like about UNT is they're consistent, and they don't just kind of give in, and they'll give in to the momentum. They keep fighting, and that's what we saw. They overcame a 14-point deficit and almost pulled out. It would have been a really good win on the road.
I want to piggyback off that real quick. So UNT is not really a team that's made to come from behind just because of their slow pace and just with the fact that they like to take their time on offense. So Saturday, to me, I think was even more impressive than the Friday game, even though they lost, just because they were able to come back from double-digit points. With that slow pace, it's not something that you can see them going on a big point run because they just take so much time off the clock with their offense. In the Friday game, it wasn't super impressive because they got out to a big lead, so they can take their time and take that time off the clock. But on Saturday, it was really a turning point for this team, I think, because we haven't seen them be able to come back from behind like that on a really good team.
I totally agree, and I think we have to give a lot of credit to the coaching. Jack, talk to me about Coach McCaslin. How do you think that he's been able to lead this team this year in such a tough year?
You know, I think it's just the way UNT is playing is really based off Grant McCaslin. He's just all-around great dude. I've heard stories of him bringing in the team during practice, after practice, watching hour-long videos about just life stories and like learning how to adjust as a man. Like Grant McCaslin is a really good coach, and he brings that to the table with defense.
I like what you said there about, helping them grow as men. I think that that's what really separates good college basketball coaches from great college basketball coaches. I think that's why you see coaches like Coach K and Roy Williams sticking around, because they really turn those boys into men. I agree, and I was proud of the team for, sticking with one series at a time. Obviously they could have been looking ahead to this weekend, but they really stuck with their game plan. But moving into this weekend, before we preview this game against UAB, let's go out to our live shot reporter, Zach Fox, to see what he has to say about this series. Zach?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. UAB and UNT both had a pretty similar weekend as far as in their last matchups with their respected sides. Both split the two games, with most recently UAB taking on UTSA and lost that game 96-79, while the Mean Green losing just slightly by 1 point to Marshall. So both squads really trying to appease their own sidelines and get back to the winning side of things. And now as far as UNT and UAB, 4-4, both of them are tied at 500, and really trying to get an edge, as this series actually dates back all the way to 1997 rather. Now the last game that these two faced was earlier in February, where it was only a one-game series, and that was played in Birmingham, where the Mean Green squeezed off the victory 71-64. Now as far as the series and like the averages and stats, things like that, UAB and the Blazers, they average about 64.5 against UNT. Meanwhile the Mean Green average just about 63, which that doesn't mean too much, but that is what they are when paired up against each other. Now, tonight's game is played here at the Super Pit at 7. We'll see if the Mean Green can not only get back above 500 against against UAB, but see, heading into the final two games of the season, you really want to be on you're playing your best basketball heading into the Conference USA tournament. So that's it for here at the Super Pit. Sarah, back to you.
Thanks, Zach. I completely agree with what you're saying about you want to play your best basketball towards the end of the season. Let's talk about this series against UAB. I know that all of us as a group, when these games got added back to the schedule, we were all extremely excited that this was going to be our last game of the regular season. I feel like we've been looking towards these games and towards this team all season long. Connor, what will it take to win this series?
I felt like against Marshall, we kind of fell into a trap playing their tempo. We cannot do that against UAB. UAB is a small ball team. They play 5 guards who all average over 20 minutes of game action per contest. We can't fall into their trap. We have to play our game. We have the size advantage, and I'll talk about this later. I like to see us get more of our big guys involved, more so than we did against Marshall. But we can't rely on the three-point game. That's not who we are. That's not who we've been all season, except for Javen Hamlet playing great for one game. So we can't fall into that trap again. We have to force them to play our tempo. We have to focus on our defense and make sure that our offense is a consistent and an efficient manner rather than just chucking up threes and relying on the threes.
And Jack, what do you see as a key?
Matchup-wise, I'm kind of curious to see how Mac is going to really put out a starting lineup. I saw when the Rockets last year, I know this is NBA, played small ball. Rick Carlisle put out Kristaps at the 5, and it was all guards on the Rockets. So I want to see if McCaslin has that same trust with Zach Simmons and Thomas Bell to put them out there to be able to guard some guards. And I don't know. I think a big key is Zach Simmons' defense. I think it's kind of sus, and I don't know if he could be able to. If you expand him out to the wing, I don't know how that's going to look.
Justin, do you agree that Zach Simmons' defense is sus? I mean, that's pretty.
I think so, but I think this is the weekend that he can potentially have a big weekend, because like Connor said, this is a small ball team. Everything they do starts with their 2 main guards, Michael Ertl and Taven Lovin, and then it goes down from there. But a very small ball team, a very fast-paced team, kind of like Marshall, but not to the extent that they're going to beat you in transition like Marshall is. So I think the reason that we were all excited when we saw these games pop back on our roster on our schedule was because we have a very similar style of play to UAB. It starts with Javian Hamlet for us. It starts with their 2 guards for them. And both teams are very efficient. This is a UAB team that shoots 45% from the field. They're not going to take a lot of three-point shots, but when they do, it's going to be Michael Ertl and Taven Lovin, as I said, because everything starts there. And the stat that really stands out to me with both these teams, UAB is plus 13 in scoring margin a game, and UNT is plus 10, which shows me that this style of ball that they play with this slow tempo, both these teams have slow tempo, and with everything started with their guards and with cutting to the basket and with getting to the basket, it wears down teams as you go through a long season. And both teams are averaging winning games by double digits right now. So very impressive, and I think this is going to be an evenly matched series this weekend.
I agree. I wouldn't be surprised if we split the series. I think it does say a lot to have these last games be at home, especially for these seniors. Connor, talk to me about some key players.
Well, I look at Zachary Simmons. Like Justin said, we have the size advantage. So if we can rely more, I think, inside and get him more involved. He was not involved in our last game against Marshall. He was involved in Friday's game against Marshall more so. He did score double-digit points in that game. He also took more shots. I think we need to get him and our big guys more involved down low. To me, it seems UNT does better when they take more efficient shots, like anyone would, but when UNT does take efficient shots, it seems to be more inside rather than with their guard play like a UAB. So I feel like with a UAB-like team, it would be easy to kind of fall into that trap and start getting into a three-point shooting contest. We can't do that. If we play defense first and then physicality inside second, I think that'll help UNT form a tempo that will be more suited for them.
I agree with you about Zach Simmons. If there was a series this season where he was going to take over a game, and we're still waiting to see it, it's this series because we have the size advantage. A lot of the Trey Jamison is going to be the UAB big man, but he doesn't log a ton of minutes. So a lot of the time, Simmons is going to be matched up against a smaller forward or against a smaller guard, and he's going to have 5 to 6 inches of height against these guys. So let's see him get back to his good offense and his good defense. If he's guarding a guard, there is no excuse why he can't have 3 to 4 blocks in this game.
I agree with both of you guys. I think that being balanced is going to be really key, and we'll make our official picks for this game later on in the show. But coming up next, let's talk about last night's game with the women against Rice. A heartbreaking loss, but they still have another chance tomorrow. We'll talk about it coming up next. Welcome back into Mean Green Game Day. Again, I'm Sarah Baskin alongside Jack, Justin, and Connor. Last night, the UNT women's played Rice, and it was a pretty heartbreaking loss. It was an up-and-down game, and in my opinion, the most exciting women's basketball game that we have played this season. Justin, what happened last night?
I think defensively with UNT, it started with just being too slow. Rice's offense, I think, matched up very well for the Owls against our defense because UNT's defense seemed to just be standing around and they seemed lost a lot. And then Rice was running these sets where they would cut and they would have screens off those cuts and cuts off the screens that UNT just couldn't guard, and they were just getting lost. And offensively for UNT, you have to credit the Rice defense because they really found a way to limit Quincy Noble and Nia Boyd. 10 combined points between the two of them on 3 of 21 shooting. So those two girls just could not find their rhythm last night. You have to credit Jazion Jackson, though, because she had a nice game, 20 points, 4 rebounds, and 6 assists, but there wasn't enough offense from outside of her in that game to bring them over the hump. And I think the worst part of this whole game was that Nancy Mulkey, Rice's best player, she's 6'10", she's a huge force in the paint. She didn't even play a lot of minutes. I think that Rice was maybe trying to conserve her for the Saturday game, knowing that they only had to win one of these 2 games this weekend. But the fact that UNT was not able to get penetration to the basket and were not able to find good shots near the basket is concerning, given that Nancy Mulkey wasn't even playing a lot.
So Jack, going off what Justin said about how Rice only needed to win 1 game, remind us all about what the playoff picture is like for these women's teams moving forward.
Yeah, so since they lost, they're the 3rd seed, and they're not gonna be able to have a bye, so they're gonna have to play in the CUSA Conference Championship playoffs, and they're gonna have to try to win their way up, and they might have to bump into Rice again, but after this game tomorrow. But I do think they're definitely beatable. You know, I with Justin, I kind of disagree, because I know Mulkey didn't play a lot of minutes, but man, she played down the stretch in the big parts of the game, and she had 7 blocks, and she really made our team one-dimensional. You know, UNT women's, they only score in the paint or the 3-point line, and they really just made us shoot threes, and it just didn't work.
She did it, and specifically in defense of Quincy Noble, it was seeming like they were just running her off the 3-point line, and then as soon as she got into the paint, Nancy Mulkey was there to meet her. And yeah, 7 blocks was super impressive in that game. And it was really a game of back and forth runs either way. It seemed like a 10-point run for Rice, a 10-point run for UNT. And it seemed like when Nancy Mulkey was in the game, that's when Rice went on their runs. So credit UNT for at least exploiting the defense, at least when Nancy Mulkey wasn't in the game, and limiting some of the things that Rice could do on their offensive side of the ball. But when she was in the game, she was just a game changer all over the place.
Connor, we mentioned Jazzy and Jackson. She had a fantastic game last night. Talk to me about her performance and how it compared to our other players, some of our best players who we tend to count on didn't have the best game last night.
That's right. Jazzy and Jackson played out of her mind. 20 points, like Justin mentioned, 66% from the field. However, the rest of the starters combined for 13% from the field. That's like a baseball number with an amount of hits in a game. I mean, that's just not something you see in college basketball. And that's not going to get the job done, regardless of how good your defense plays. So again, Jackson, she played awesome. But you have to have more contributors. Now, fortunately, the bench played okay. They got several points in there. They also shot 30% from the field. But to beat Rice, one of the best women's college basketball teams in the state of Texas, you're going to have more than just one person contributing to the scoring board.
Jack, what do you think happened to our other girls? Do you think they just got shut down by Rice?
Yeah, it was just Mulkey just being, 6'10" as a girl, which just blows my mind. Noble had probably her worst game of the season, 1 for 11, 5 points, and then Nia Boyd had 5 points, 2 for 10 shooting. So all around, just wasn't efficient. They need to get better looks. The offense was just too stagnant against Rice. So hopefully we see that for Saturday and then in the conference tournament.
I will say, though, because there was points in the game where Jaylee Mitchell had to take out Nia Boyd and Quincy Noble because they were just struggling so much on offense, but there was nobody on UNT that could create their own shot in that game besides Jayzion Jackson. She was getting to the lane very well. She was creating her own shot, but for the most part, all season long, when Nia Boyd and Quincy Noble aren't on their game and they're not getting to the rim, just nobody else can create their own shot. And that's due in large part to the fact that there's not enough ball movement and not enough cuts on offense to get to the basket. That's why they're too one-dimensional and just shooting 3-pointers this year. They have to get to the basket more.
Yeah, they have people that just kind of just spot up, and I know Justin has a person he wants to talk about that just sits on the 3-point line, but yeah, it's just too stagnant. I watched the game live. It was just boring, UNT's offense, just no ball movement.
Yeah, it's Destiny Brooks that I was going to say is the one who just sits in the corner. But it really just seems like everybody but Nia Boyd and Quincy Noble, they don't even dribble the ball. It just seems like it's those two that have to create the shots for everybody else. And they can do it, but they weren't really able to last night, and they weren't scoring themselves. So Rice was able to kind of not really watch them and watch someone like Jayzion Jackson who was having a great night.
I agree. And listen, we're gonna get into Saturday's game and what we really need to improve on. But before we do, let's send it back out to Zach Fox to see what he has to say.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, UNT women's coming off of a tough loss last night at home, 64-58. Now, this is coming after leading at halftime by 3, 31-28. Jayzion Jackson actually led the game with 20. Now, head coach Jaylee Mitchell, she had a little thought after the game, and she stated, "I still like how hard we played. We will correct our mistakes and hopefully have a better outcome on Sunday." Now, Rice, boy, they dominate the series. Right now, 13-3 is the overall record as the Owls comfortably have. Now, Rice also has the longest win streak throughout the both of them, and that win streak is now 8 games, and that is up to the current date thanks to last night. Now, UNT has, as far as their last 10 matchups, UNT has actually only won 1 time against the Owls, and the averages it kind of speak for themselves. The Rice, they average just about 63 a game, when while the Mean Green only comfortably 4 points behind at 59, so they both battle really well. There's never really a blowout, so that's good. However, the UNT women at home, it's not really home court advantage. They're 1-6, and when you have an overall record of 3-13, it's never going to sound good. But I mean, if you're trying to look for some positives, they do have 2 wins on the road at Rice, and that's where they head to finalize their 2021 season before the playoffs. So we'll see if they can muster up some momentum heading into the Conference USA tournament, but they still got a lot to prove.
Thanks, Zach. All right, guys, let's get into Saturday's game. Connor, what are the keys to the game?
Well, it's quite obvious. We have to get more people involved. And they can't be standing around. They have to move, because you're not going to beat Rice by standing. You're not going to be a lot of those better elite teams by standing around. You have to move. I was taught that in an early age. Everyone is. And until we do that, we can't expect to win. Regardless, however, this is something to be aware of. I wonder what Rice's mentality is going to be like entering tomorrow's game. They may not play a lot of their starters. They already have the division won, so it's going to be interesting to see UNT's mentality versus their mentality. However, as bad as we played on the offensive end, particularly this past game, we still lost in a close game, and so wouldn't be surprised to see maybe us even, again, possibly win, because Rice may not be exactly at 100% mentally or physically prepared.
I mean, listen, we talked a lot about what went wrong, but it was a close game. The momentum was swaying back and forth in that game. They were up in the second quarter. Jack, how do they get that momentum back moving forward?
Well, you know, basketball is a game of runs, and there's always going to have teams go back and forth. But it really comes down, I think, to defense. They need to play defense a little bit better. You know, they led going into halftime, and I looked up the scoreboard. I was like, "Yo, what's going on?" It doesn't feel like they should be leading at halftime, but the Rice offense kind of just wore down the UNT defense over time. And I mean, in 8th grade, I ran a play called Chin, and Haley Swayze for Rice came up the court, and she called Chin. So I mean, UNT, man, you got to play some defense. Chin's a play that's been around for years. So I mean, stuff like that. It's like easy cut to the basket. They just need to shut it down.
Justin, let's talk about what Connor was talking about, Rice's mindset. Do you think it's going to be an easier game to win?
Yeah, I think it's going to be, but UNT hasn't exactly wowed us on the road this season, and he made a good point about we don't know the extent of how much their starters are going to play, but I think the key to this game, since we expect to see Nancy Mulkey in some capacity, you have to find a way to limit her. You can't really stop her because we don't have somebody who can height-wise compete with her, but we saw a combination of Rochelle Lee and Tamisha Lampkin kind of getting physical with her in the game last night, and it was working out because they did a good job of at least blocking her out on rebounds. It seemed like she still finished with 10 rebounds, but she's 6'10", so that's going to happen. But it seemed like at some points in the game they're getting a lot more physical with her, and it was giving her a harder time. So I think to slow her down, you're going to have a combination of Rochelle Lee and Tamisha Lampkin being very physical with her inside the paint, because I don't think somebody like Madison Townley is necessarily tall enough to compete with her, whereas somebody like Tamisha Lampkin is a big body and she can really get physical down there with Mulkey.
And we'll make all of our official picks for that game again towards the end of the show. But coming up next, we're going to look at the CUSA tournament. Who's UNT's biggest competition? We all have a different answer, so stick around. Welcome back into Mean Green Game Day. Well, like I've been saying, last weekend of the regular season, we're moving into conference tournaments next week. UNT does have a shot in this USA tournament. I know we all have our sights set on March Madness, but who is the biggest hurdle standing in our way? Justin, who's your pick?
I think it's Western Kentucky, and it's just for one simple reason. Charles Bassey. The dude is a freak. He averages a double-double, 18 points a game, 12 rebounds a game. And I think from a UNT perspective, they don't have a center that is physical enough and who is good enough to compete with Charles Bassey. You know, Simmons and Usmani, they can get physical inconsistently throughout the year, but I just don't think that we have somebody who can shut him down in a big-time game when they really need it. Plus, throw Tavian Hollingsworth in there with him, who averages his own 14 a game. He'll shoot the ball from anywhere and shoots just under 50% from the field, so he has his own very impressive numbers. Listen, if you want to get to March Madness, this is a team that you're going to have to beat in the conference tournament, and they're a proven team. They're a very capable team. This is a team that beat Alabama back in December at the start of the year. They almost beat West Virginia, and they could get an at-large bid for March Madness. So definitely a tough task if UNT has to see them in the tournament. But if you get to March Madness, this is the type of teams that you're going to be playing.
I mean, do you think it made a difference that we didn't get to see them in the regular season? That was the game.
I think it just adds a little bit of fuel to the fire if we get to see them in the conference tournament. Because if we play them, it would be the conference final just because of the cross-division matchup. So I think that all of the aspects of the games getting canceled, it being the conference final game, I just think that would all add just more fuel to the fire.
I think we all agree that Western Kentucky is tough. They're first in the East. They're sitting at 10-2 in conference. But Jack, you picked a different team. Who do you think?
Yeah, I went the underdog route, and I went Marshall, you know, the Thundering Herd. I think, you know, Marshall overall, they have Tavion Kinsley, who scores 20 points per game, and they have Jared West, who leads this USA in assists, you know, at six assists a game. Overall, the pace they play is just so scary, and like they did against us, if they get hot with the three ball, they can literally beat anybody. And so, you know, when it's March and it's college basketball, anything can happen, and they could catch fire, and they could easily, I think they can knock off a couple teams or get a couple wins.
All right, Connor, let's hear your team.
I'm going to go with the Louisiana Tech Bulldogs. And this team has been playing some of the best college basketball in the mid-majors, specifically since January 16th. And since that spectacular Saturday, the Bulldogs and a player named Kenneth Lofton Jr. If you don't know that name yet, you will very soon. He has been on fire in the last couple of months of the season. He is shooting better than 50% from the field in every single game in those 12 games since January 16th, except for 3 games. And he's had double figures in points and rebounds in almost every single game, except for one. And that one was the one game that they lost to us a month ago. So this Bulldog team and Kenneth Lofton Jr. is not a team that you want to play right now. And if they keep playing the way they are, they're going to have some lofty expectations.
Ooh, lofty expectations. Listen, I really like La Tech as a team. However, my pick, and call me crazy, I think that UAB is going to be a roadblock for us. We have to get past them this weekend. We're going to have that recency as when we move into the tournament. They will have just seen us. They'll know exactly what we have. I think that they're going to be tough. I mean, call me crazy. What do you guys think? You
know, I think UAB overall, they've just played some cupcake teams. You know, they haven't really beat anybody in particular that I think is a good win. They lost both games to La Tech. They split with ODU and UTSA. It's just overall UAB, that record just doesn't describe who they really are. And then small ball, I hate small ball. I don't think small ball is going to work, especially in the tournament when you got to face a Charles Bassey, a Kenneth Bulldog Lofton, or Zach Simmons and Thomas Bell. So,
I have a question for you, Jack, to add on to that. Had UAB had a more difficult, so had their conference schedule started out with the difficult teams first and then ended with the easier teams, in your opinion, do you think maybe perhaps we wouldn't be viewing them as the same level of good?
Well, yeah, I think it's the teams that they didn't play were in the conference. They went like on they were 15-0 or something. It might have been even better, but they went on a non-con just craze, winning every game, and then they started playing conference teams and started slowing down. So I think to your your question, Connor, I think if they would have played these tougher teams earlier, we wouldn't even be talking about them.
The only reason I think that UAB maybe isn't as tough as a team like La Tech or Western Kentucky is just because I think UNT matches up really well statistically and schematically to a team like UAB, just because everything starts with the guards, everything goes to the hoop with kind of both teams. So that's why I think that a team like Western Kentucky would just be more tough.
So Justin, I know you're on the same page with me a little bit about UAB. Let's talk about some players to watch in the conference, and your guy is from UAB, correct?
Yes, he is. Quan Jackson. Now, this guy does the dirty work with UAB. Okay, a lot of the numbers a lot of the things that he does isn't going to show up on the box score. He averages good numbers, 12 points a game, or just under 12 points a game. And he averages 2 steals a game, and that's the number that really stands out to me, because when you watch UAB on defense, it is this guy that's getting into passing lane, that is flying all around, that is the first to run out in transition and get a look. He's a full effort type of guy, and he's a guy that as the game kind of goes on, he can really wear down a defense. So I would say watch out for him this weekend against UNT and then into the conference tournament as well.
I agree. I think he's kind of a sleeper on that team. You know, when you're on a team with Michael Ertl and Taven Lovin, sometimes it's kind of like the third or fourth guy on our team. You just sort of don't think about them as much, but they can be real difference makers. Jack, who's your key player?
Yeah, so I got a weird example of how to explain this, but I've been watching a Michael Jackson documentary lately, and when you look at the Jackson 5, it reminds me of Zach Simmons, and then you need Michael Jackson to secure you and make you overall a better group. And I think that's what Thomas Bell does with Zach Simmons. Thomas Bell is a dream to have on any college team. I mean, he leads the team in blocks. He can shoot threes at 38% a game, and he's amazing around the rim with field goal percentage. Overall, he's just very efficient and our best defensive player. So he helps Zach Simmons out a lot, and he's going to be huge for the conference tournament for us.
I agree. I do like watching him. He's just an unselfish player. I think that makes a lot of difference when you're playing college basketball. You gotta be unselfish. You have to know your place on the squad. Connor, talk to me about your guy.
Well, typically late in the season, you like to go to your players who've been playing well lately. It doesn't matter who was picked to be the preseason all-conference player. It matters who's playing well, who can you count on. And I think when you look at this UAB matchup, particularly for UNT, I'm going to go with Thomas Bell and Zachary Simmons. I think those two guys are going to find a rhythm here these next couple of games that gives them some added confidence and UNT some more confidence heading into the conference tournament, because ultimately for UNT's sake, regardless of what they do in this series against UAB, they are going to have to win Conference USA, the Conference USA tournament, to make the big dance.
I agree. Listen, my key player to watch is Javon Jackson out of UTSA. Now we don't talk much about UTSA because they're with us in the West, and the West is just really strong on top. You got La Tech on top, followed by UNT, followed by UAB, and then there's UTSA all the way down at 4. But Javon Jackson is leading the conference in scoring. He did last year. He's averaging over 20 points a game. It's his senior year. I think he's got a lot to prove. I think UTSA, I'm not willing to say that UTSA is going to be like a big sleeper, a big threat within the tournament, but I think that when you have just an outstanding player like that, especially moving into their senior year, who has lived through these COVID times, knows how to make the best of things, and is playing out of his mind towards the end of the season, I think you can't ignore him. So Javon Jackson's going to be my guy.
Yeah, Jackson, man, he's always been an amazing scorer. I just think what happens if he wasn't on UTSA and was on an actual decent team that could recruit, he might be one of the top prospects. But yeah.
What do you think, Justin?
Well, I wanted to talk about Thomas Bell for 1 second, because he really reminds me of Quan Jackson, because he's kind of the X factor for this team. I talked about in the first segment of the show a little bit how him and James Reese have really been the two other scorers besides Javian Hamlet. There have been games this season where Hamlet kind of falls into a struggle offensively, and even though Hamlet struggles sometimes shooting the ball, he's still a game impactor, because he can still drive to the lane and find the kick-out lanes and make good passes and stuff like that. But their second two leading scorers have really been Thomas Bell and James Reese. And Thomas Bell had a great season last year. He was a great defender last year, and he's doing that again this season. But he has really taken his offense up a notch, and he has really filled the void that sometimes Javian Hamlet has left with his scoring in a lot of games this year.
I think for us UNT fans, one obvious key player is always just going to be Javian Hamlet. I really want to see what he can do moving into a tournament. I think we've all agreed that maybe this year wasn't as strong last year, but that's sort of across the board for players in this conference. Like my guy Javon Jackson, he was averaging over 25 last year and only 20 this year. Those are still outstanding numbers. So Connor, talk to me a little bit about what you want to see from Javian Hamlet.
Well, in March, guard play is critical. And something to look forward to when you start watching March Madness, the big tournament, the big dance. The teams that have the better guard play, in my opinion, will do better. Now, you need a good, well-oiled machine, so to speak, with your whole entire team. But good guard play will set the great teams from the good teams and the good teams from the average teams. And what UNT has is an elite guard, one of the best guards in the mid-majors, and Javian Hamlet. And we saw him against Marshall. He had arguably one of his best games of the season, if not his best game. And if he continues to shoot from the perimeter like he did against Marshall, I think UNT becomes just that much more of a dangerous team because as we already know, their defense and everything else about them is right where it needs to be. Now they just need to have more scorers get involved, and I think Reese is a guy who's been stepping up to the plate a little bit more this last month of the season. So I think UNT becomes even more of a dangerous team than what they were before, as long as Hamlet can shoot from the perimeter like this.
Yeah, you're right about the guard play. And one other name that I wanted to toss out that's really been solid all season is J.J. Murray. And he's a really interesting player to me because on offense, he's sort of a liability. He's undersized, first of all, so that really limits what he can do. He doesn't shoot the ball overly well. He's second worst on the team in field goal percentage. But on defense, this guy is flying all around, and he gives opposing guards a tough time, and he can lock down starting guards on opposing teams. So maybe this weekend he'll see a lot of minutes because they have a bunch of different guards that can beat us, and we need some guys that can match up against them. So maybe he stops Michael Ertl from shooting a three down the stretch of this game or something. J.J. Murray's defense has been really critical in a lot of games this season, and even though on offense he hasn't done the best, his defense he's made some defensive plays this year that have turned games around for UNT.
I totally agree. I think UNT can contend in this tournament. I really do believe in them as a team. I'm excited to see what they do moving forward. But coming up next, we're going to talk about who we feel like are contenders and pretenders in the big game. So coming up next. Welcome back into Mean Green Game Day. Again, I'm Sarah alongside Justin, Connor, and Jack. Boys, let's talk about March Madness. Again, we're moving towards the end of the regular season. We're moving into conference championships. A lot of teams are starting to play hot, so let's decide who we think is a contender and who's a pretender. I'm going to start, and I'm going to say that my contender is actually Oklahoma State. So Oklahoma State, obviously they've got Cade Cunningham, and when you have that, when you're playing your game behind that man, you can go pretty far. But I think it says a lot about them that they were able to to just completely sweep OU. I think that they're pretty underrated in the rankings. And I'm really excited to see what they can do moving forward. What do you guys think?
Yeah, they're getting hot at the right time. Their last 5 games, they've been awesome. They've won 2 overtime games. So Cade Cunningham, definitely going to be a top 3 pick in the NBA draft. So that's a good pick.
Yeah, Cade Cunningham's such an interesting player for me because when you watch Oklahoma State play, it seems like Cade Cunningham doesn't really start playing until the second half, until when his team needs him most. And that's what makes him so good is that whenever his team needs him, he's able to step up and do that. Yeah, Oklahoma State I think is a good contender.
They're turning it on at the right time of the season, like Jack said, and they have elite guards play. They have elite guard play, starting with Cade Cunningham, who arguably will be the #1 overall pick for the upcoming NBA draft. So I think Oklahoma State's a very good contender.
I think so too. Listen, you got to get hot at the right time. So hopefully that's why we need UNT to win both of these games this weekend. Justin, who's your contender?
Well, I think this is a team that's going to the Final Four and they can win a national championship. Michigan. Now, I was kind of concerned coming off their long COVID break how they're going to play, but right off the bat, a win at Wisconsin and a win at Ohio State. At that point, you just have to say that they're a national title contender. With how Baylor has struggled this past week, Michigan jumped them in the rankings. I know they got killed to Illinois, but only 2 losses on the season. They've played very solid all year in the Big Ten. In a Big Ten conference where there's a lot of potential Final Four contenders and Elite Eight contenders. They've really just stuck at the top. They have Hunter Dickinson, who gives everybody's troubles inside. And I think my favorite part about watching Michigan is their zone defense. And it's not just their zone defense, but it's how they play their zone defense, because they'll start out in a man look, and then they'll switch to a 1-2-on-1 zone or a 2-3 zone. And what that does when you have a guy like Hunter Dickinson is you guarantee that he's at the rim. You guarantee that he's going to be protecting the rim at all times. And that's something that he's so good at doing. And then, so when you play that zone defense, he's at the rim, and then couple that with their super efficient offense, and Michigan is a national title contender.
And that's coming from an Ohio State fan. So
yeah, it is. It pains me to say that, but just the way that they were able to handle the Buckeyes, they did whatever they wanted on offense against the Buckeyes. And ever since that game, the Buckeyes have faltered. 3 straight losses after that. So Michigan, that was a wake-up call for the Buckeyes. And it's been a while since Michigan has really been this powerhouse in basketball, like an actual title contender. But I think this is their year.
And OSU got the better unis, though. So the better icy white uniforms.
Listen, I applaud you. I don't think, as a Longhorns fan, I don't think I could ever pick OU for something like that. So I applaud you for putting your fandom to the side. Connor, talk to me about your contender.
Contender is Florida State for me. I like the way this team plays. They have always played this well. It's just they don't seem to get all the hype in the preseason. They'll start maybe ranked, or they'll just be outside the top 25. And by season's end, you look over the last 3, 4, 5 years, they end the season in the top 10. This team, all 5 starters can contribute. They got depth. They can all run. They're one of the fastest and most athletic teams in the country, and they can play defense. This is a team that's been playing well the last month of the season, and I guarantee it, they are going to have an elite run, so maybe to the Elite Eight, so to speak, in the Big Dance. I would not be surprised to see this team potentially get to the Final Four. We just have some truly elite teams like Gonzaga, Baylor, Michigan, Ohio State, Illinois, a lot of the Big Ten teams, quite frankly. But Florida State's a team that I would watch for in the month of March.
Yeah, they have really good consistency, like you said, Connor. They always are just at the end of the season, they're always in it.
I agree. Listen, I like Florida State. I'm not sure that I see them like elite, like Final Four level. I agree with you, Connor. I could see them getting to the Elite Eight, but Final Four is going to be tough for me to really commit to them going that far. But Jack, talk to me about your contender.
Yeah, so it's in the Missouri Valley Conference. I like the smaller teams like Drake and Loyola, but I'm going Loyola Chicago. In 2018 they went to the Final Four. I'm not saying they're going to do that again. I think they can get to the Sweet 16 if they keep playing defense like they are. They gave up 55 points a game max. That's amazing defense. And you saw what they did against UNT. They just disrupted our offense. So I think overall, Loyola Chicago is just one of the most physical and defensive teams in the league, or in college football, or college basketball, sorry. And they have Cameron Krutwig, who sounds like a Pokemon. So he's 15 points a game, a double-double, so he's amazing.
Connor, what do you think about that one?
I like Loyola Chicago. They were one of my favorite teams a few years ago. I think a lot of people kind of hopped on the bandwagon after that. I mean, how can you not like Sister Jean, Loyola Chicago? I mean,
She's
how
still
can you
alive.
not exactly? How can you not like a team that just surprises everyone? Not just winning their first game on a buzzer shot, but getting to the Final Four. Maybe a little bit more difficult this year because this season we have truly elite teams. I'm going to go out on a limb here. I think I said this a month ago. In my opinion, for this particular season, we haven't had a year like this of college basketball since 2011 and 2012 when Kentucky and Syracuse were really good. Syracuse had some injuries down the stretch, really hurt them. But we had a couple of elite teams that season, and I think we have it again this year with Gonzaga, Baylor, Michigan. I mentioned them earlier. But I love Loyola Chicago.
Yeah, Loyola Chicago is really interesting because usually when Cinderella teams, so to speak, in March Madness have a Final Four run or a good run like Loyola Chicago did, you'll see in the future that they kind of drop off. But Loyola Chicago, that wasn't the case at all. They've had sustained success since that run, and now they're here again, and Jack's taking them as a sleeper. So definitely a team that can make a lot of noise. They've been there, they've done that. So
I do. I love that pick, Jack. I can't wait to see how far they go in the tournament. Let's talk about pretenders, though. 2 of you guys picked pretenders in the top 10. I'm going to start with mine. My pretender is OU. listen, Oklahoma is on a 4-game lose streak. They're not playing well at the right time of the year. I just don't buy them. I don't buy their ranking. I don't buy them as a team. I think that when you start falling apart so bad like that as you move into March, it doesn't bode well for you, trying to move any further. I think the game against Texas last night, they played pretty well, but they just couldn't get it together. They just couldn't get it together and pull out a win, which is saying a lot, especially because they were at home in their last game. So what do you guys think?
Yeah, they're the opposite of OK State. They're getting bummier as the season ends, and so I think but it's the Big 12. Every team besides Baylor, in my opinion, has had that little skid. We saw Kansas, and look at Kansas now. They're winning games. So I think Oklahoma may be able to come back, but they're losing at the wrong time.
Losing at the wrong time, but they are in a very difficult conference. It's a different thing when you're in the Big 12 compared to the SEC or other major conferences, or the ACC is a little bit down this season. But yeah, Oklahoma hasn't played great basketball as of late, but they're still a team in my mind who could still make a potential Sweet 16 kind of run.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I just think the problem with Oklahoma, and it's probably why you're picking them as a pretender, Sarah, is that they just peaked too early. And like Jack said, we saw that a lot in the Big 12 this season with kind of the roller coaster for everybody except Baylor. Teams peaking early, teams peaking late. Oklahoma seems to maybe be on the downfall at the worst possible time of the year. But the flip side of that is that when they get to March Madness and they're not having to see teams like Baylor and Kansas every game, maybe they're more well equipped to play a 12 seed or 11 seed in the tournament, right?
I mean, listen, we'll have to see. OU sucks. Anyway, Justin, tell me who your pretender is.
So my pretending team is Alabama, and I know they're a top 10 team, but to me when I watch them, I just think they've kind of been the beneficiary of a wild SEC conference. In the SEC, you have teams like Kentucky, who's normally one of the blue bloods that kind of had a bad year. Teams like Florida, Tennessee, and Missouri, all in and out of the rankings all season long. And I just think Alabama has kind of just remained solid and have kind of just played their game while the other teams have faltered around them. So I just think with the quality of wins and their quality of schedule, I just don't think that merits a top 10 ranking. I don't expect them to be as high of a seed in March Madness as they look now, because the March Madness committee will take into account the grand scheme of a season and the strength of opponents a lot more than the AP poll will, because the AP poll is just about what happened in the last week more than about over the course of a season. But from an Alabama perspective, I just think it's hard to pick a team from the SEC with everything that's kind of going down this year in that conference to maybe make an Elite Eight run. And I would even put a team like West Virginia, who's at 10 right now, over a team like Alabama and feel more comfortable about that.
Connor, tell me your pretender.
Well, let's stay in the SEC. I'd agree with Justin on a lot of his thoughts about that conference, but I'm going to go with Tennessee. To me, Alabama's a team that could potentially make it to the Sweet 16. I could actually see them getting upset in the round of 32. To me, Alabama's too talented of a team to get upset in the first round. But Tennessee, I think, could get upset in the first round. Why? Well, earlier we were talking about the Contenders playing well towards the end of the season, getting hot at the right time. Well, Tennessee is vice versa. They're getting cold at the wrong time. They haven't won many games as of late. One of their only wins is against Vanderbilt, and even that was a little bit questionable. Tennessee, the biggest thing that kind of comes out to me about the Volunteers, that they struggle offensively and they're not elite defensively like they were a couple of years ago. So to me, Tennessee is a team that's going to be seeded like a 6 or a 7 and can potentially get beat by a 10 or 11. That's a better team from a tougher conference whose record may not be the same. Again, Tennessee's in the SEC, so they don't face that tough competition week in and week out. So to me, again, they're a team that could get upset in the round of 64.
I know, Connor, as a college football fan, it pains you to say that the SEC doesn't see that type of competition because, football, it's just not that way.
And baseball.
Jack, tell me your pretender.
Yeah, so the ranking, I don't think tells the truth about Houston. They lost to ECU. Everybody here has heard me say that. It's just, man, it's ECU, come on. But I think Houston overall is kind of like Alabama. They live and die by the 3 ball. They play better defense than Bama, in my opinion. But when you live and die by the 3 ball, it doesn't work. It never works, and it hasn't worked. And that's with NBA and college basketball. And they haven't played anybody good and beaten anybody good. So the American Conference is pretty weak this year, and I just don't think Houston's all about that.
Yeah, I talked about Houston in one of the previous shows, and that's kind of the same thing that I said, was that they play in the ACC, and there's not very many good teams there. So they're potentially a team that when they get to March Madness and they see a Big 12 team that maybe didn't have the best record, like Connor was talking about, that maybe is a lot better than their record shows. How well are they prepared for that? I also think they're overranked because I think you have to take in college basketball the quality of opponents and the quality of schedule a lot more into account than just final record, because the records don't tell all the story, especially with Houston.
I totally agree. Listen, I've got this written down on paper. I'm going to hold all 4 of you guys to it. But coming up next, we're going to make our predictions for some big games over the weekend. And it might surprise you who's in the lead all time on predictions. Stick around. Welcome back to Mean Green Game Day. Thank you so much for being with us today. It's been a lot of fun for us to be here. Before we let you go, we're going to make some predictions on some games. First game coming up is UNT Women's versus Rice. Now, we discussed that the stakes are a lot higher for the UNT women, so I'm going to go with UNT.
Yeah, I'm going UNT as well. I think they're going to bounce back, and I think Noble's actually going to have a good game.
What about you, Justin?
I'm going to take Rice here. I'm assuming that they're going to play their starters for most of the game, but just last night just didn't impress me. A lot of the things that UNT was doing defensively. I just think Nancy Mulkey's too much to handle once again. And when in doubt, pick the home team, right? I'll take Rice.
Yeah, that's my motto. What about you, Connor?
I've seen this before when teams already have a division or conference won, especially in the last game. They won't. Their psyche will be different. I'll go with UNT in this game, despite it being on the road. I feel like the UNT women's team can find a way to pull out a victory.
I think so too. Let's send it over to Zach.
You know, guys, I really think that the UNT women's basketball team really had their best shot last night. 64-58 obviously was that final, but the Rice Owls, they are playing way too good at basketball, and they're not going to lose at home. Unfortunately, I have the Mean Green dropping their last two.
All right, well, let's see if Justin and Zach are right. Hopefully not. Let's go Oklahoma State versus West Virginia. I'm definitely going to be taking Oklahoma State. Listen, I know that they're an underdog in this game, but I really do believe in this team. Jack, are you with me?
Hey, go Pokes, baby. Cade Cunningham, potential #1 pick, just too good.
This is the Big 12 conference. I mean, anything can happen. Just when you think a team's heating up, they fall. Everybody pretty much besides Baylor this year has done that. I'm going to take West Virginia once again at home. It's their senior night. They always play well in Morgantown. This is a huge game for the Big 12 standings. So, again, the home team, West Virginia.
I'm going to go with the team that's hot right now, and that's Oklahoma State. And I don't think we should be calling them OK State because I think they're better than OK.
I agree.
Nice
Zach, what do you think?
You know, I really think that this is going to be a huge upset. You know, West Virginia playing pretty good basketball, but you can't deny that Oklahoma State is really one of the best teams going in right now. winning 4 of their last 5 and upsetting a bunch of teams along the way. Now, West Virginia, looking back just about a week or 2 ago, they actually lost to a number 16 ranked Oklahoma. Sadly, I think there's a little better of an Oklahoma team playing at the moment, and I think there's going to be another upset in West Virginia.
All right, glad you guys are all with me on Oklahoma State. Now, Justin, we haven't had the best luck picking West Virginia, so we'll see how that one works out for you. All right, Illinois versus Ohio State. I'm taking Illinois.
Yeah, I'm going Illinois as well. Kofi Cockburn, potential Big Ten Player of the Year. I think the rebounding is just going to be too much, and he's going to be better than anybody else.
I'm going to take Ohio State, and I'm not just being a homer here. I really think the Buckeyes are going to win this game, and they have 3 straight losses now, so they've kind of fallen out of the 1 or even 2 seed conversation. They really need this win to get back into those conversations. We don't even know to the extent of if Ayo Dosunmu is going to be able to play. Illinois, their last 2 games were against Wisconsin and Michigan. They handled those teams easily, so I don't think they can win 3 straight games in Columbus. Buckeyes aren't going to end losing 4 in a row. Give me the Buckeyes.
Connor, who you got real quick?
Y'all can't see me right now, but I'm standing right next to Justin. No way I'm picking Illinois. I'll pick Ohio State with this one. I don't see them dropping their last 4 either.
Zach, who you got?
Ooh. This is going to be an ESPN classic. You have number 4, number 7. This is going to be really good. Ohio State, they dropped from the number 4 spot, and Illinois has climbed their way up all the way up to the number 4. And well deserving of it. I have Illinois taking out the Buckeyes.
All right, next game is Duke, Carolina. Normally a big game. Listen, I'm going to take Duke. A lot of my family went to Duke. I looked at the stats. Their records don't look very well, but all of their statistics kind of match up pretty well. I'm just going to take Duke on this one. Jack?
Yeah, I'm in love with Matthew Hurt at Duke, and I'm a Duke fan, so Duke.
Justin, real
I'm
quick.
going to disagree with you guys again on this one. The turning point of the season, I think, for UNC was when they beat Duke the first time in Cameron Indoor. So I think they're going to repeat that again. They matched up well the first time. Plus, I want to see Duke come here for the NIT since UNC's hosting that. So they need to keep losing. So let's go UNC.
It's crazy to see this game not have any ranked teams with it, but I'll go with the Tar Heels in this one.
Zach, who you got?
Yes, the classic rivalry, UNC and Duke. However, it's going to be a little less flashy than what we've seen in a long time ago to even in recent years. However, I do see the Tar Heels winning it in the end.
All right, and our last game that we're going to pick is going to be UAB versus UNT. Listen, you guys know I'm a big UNT homer. I'm going to pick UNT on this one. I think they can pull out the series. Jack, real quick, who you got?
Yeah, I got UNT as well.
Yeah, UNT as well.
UNT.
Zach, you going to be a clean sweep?
Pretty similar in rankings. However, I do have Old Dominion taking the L here with Western Kentucky. Western Kentucky, as mentioned before earlier in the show, they have a good shot of taking on UNT in the Conference USA final. So this is going to be another nail-biter as far as similarity in standings, but Western Kentucky should win this one out.
I believe Zach is taking UAB on that one. So he stopped the clean sweep. We'll see if he's going to be right. Overall, Jack's in the lead. Jack is absolutely crushing it, so you guys need to step it up. Thank you so much for joining us today on Mean Green Game Day. This is our last show of the regular season. Hopefully we'll see you back soon. Thanks so much.